Tonight joining us is going to be Bryn Blankinship. She's a hypnotherapist, an author, and an international instructor specializing in the field of past life regression and life between lives. So it should be a great show tonight. Bryn, welcome to the Underground.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on. This is one of my favorite subjects. And we actually got your name from Dr. Newton. So we were happy that he recommended you because I've been dying to get somebody on to talk about this stuff. So
great.
And this is going to be a learning, like a learning experience for me because I'm not really that familiar with this field of research.
Well, what would you like to know?
Well, so let's start by just talking a little bit about what it is you do with the past lives and the life between lives.
Okay. So I have clients that will come and they want to explore their past along their soul's history and, beyond this current life. And sometimes they just want to know if they've had a past life, and other times they want to find great meaning as to why they're here in their current life. So you go back into the past life to explore, but it's really to give you more insight into what you're here to do now.
So, Bryn, let me ask you this. When you go back and you into people's past lives, a past life regression, how far typically do you go back? A couple 100 years, a couple 1,000 years? How far?
It can go as far back as it needs to go.
Okay.
So if someone came in for a past life, we might leave that open and just ask it to go back to a past life that's important to explore.
Okay.
So they may go back to 1952. They might go back to 1700s. They might go back to biblical times, or they might go back to a life on another planet.
Oh, that's interesting. Let's. How does that work? So basically, what you're telling me is that I am Rick Hale now here sitting in 2013, but a couple thousand years ago, I could have been an alien on a different world.
Occasionally, clients will go back, to a past life on another planet, and sometimes they'll talk about different bodies, that are different than our earthly bodies, and that's typical in a session. And you might have a client that, Earth was their first incarnation. So I was saying how in a past life, you might just leave it open-ended and let it go where it's going to go and see what comes up for that day. That's how I like to work, and just let spirit guide it. Or if we're doing a life between lives session, we like to guide it to the most recent past life. So it's a more current past life, and then we'll guide them through that life, take them to the end of it, and then explore in between the life between lives and talk with guides and council of elders and all kinds of cool things.
Yeah, so I actually have had both of those.
You have?
I've done both of those. It's something that I was mentioning to Rick that I did my first past life regression. I did because I wanted to write an article about it, and that was the excuse. I was writing an article about it, but it provided the impetus for something that I've always wanted to do anyway. So it was really cool. And then for years I wanted to do a life between life session, but I didn't really move on it. And I sort of feel like you do these things when it's right for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did it about a year ago. And what a fascinating experience that is. But before we get to life between lives, I wanted to mention something, or I wanted to ask you something about life on other planets, because this has always fascinated me. One of the things that I've read about is that there are people who, in hypnosis, when they experience life on another planet, it's a mental world. And I wanted to ask you about that. What exactly is that?
Well, clients tend to describe a mental world as being that type of place where communications are telepathic. They're done mentally, not necessarily the way we're speaking right now. Mm-hmm. And you can get many, many descriptions of how they speak and how they communicate there. Often they don't have bodies or they're balls of energy, so to speak, but not bodies like we inhabit here on Earth.
Okay.
I've had clients that have gone to water worlds, and it's really interesting because they'll speak in different ways. They'll describe telepathic communications. They'll describe clicking sounds, but it's almost like a Morse code, but they know what it means. Like,
right.
They don't understand the code, but they understand the meaning of what's being imparted.
Right. So how do people, when they have this experience, like being in a mental world, or being in a water world, or being in even like a life between lives, how do they find the words to describe the experience when it's an experience that's so different from what we have here?
Well, there are times when there are no words to describe what's happening, but they do their best to describe it. The words just come, but if they're speaking, they'll say it's different than the language we speak here. It's a language I've never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, different than in a past life where they might be speaking Russian and know that they're speaking Russian, but they understand it enough to recognize that it's a language here on Earth. It's just so cool to hear them describe what's happening as it's unfolding before them, because, you know, they're surprised. They weren't really expecting that it could go where it goes, even though it's part of their past. It's just that it does, and it makes sense. And as it starts to unfold, they find out more and more about that life and what was meaningful to them about it.
Okay. Well, David in our chat room wants to know, one of our listeners, he wants to know how you know the memories are real.
Well, that's a good question, because clients will often say, you know, it was so wild, it felt like I made that up. You know, how do I know it was real? But if you have them close their eyes and make up something that they know they haven't experienced before, like say a trip to Alaska, and they know they've never been there, and have them describe it, it seems to come from a different part of the mind. Mm-hmm. The description is different. When the client is describing the past life or the life between lives, it flows through them in ways that it just flows through them in descriptions that are not like the client. It's hard to describe over the radio. I could show you in person. That's deep trance. They're deep. There's a timelessness that takes place. So they might feel like 30, 40 minutes have gone by, but it's been several hours.
Yeah, that's what happened in my life between lives. I was there for like 4 hours, and I honestly, when he brought me out of it, I was like, okay, well, that was like 15 minutes. I thought this was going to be 4 hours, or, you know.
Exactly. Well, my story that's in Memories of the Afterlife, it's called When Children Teach from the Grave. My client went under. She went under very easily. We took her through the past life into the LBL, the life between lives.
Right.
And we must have started the session at about 11, and we finished up about 4:30 that afternoon. And I had pages and pages of notes. I'd taken notes. I was recording it, and she came out of it, and she goes, I guess she didn't get that much,
Yeah.
And I said, are you kidding me? She didn't have any idea that it was as late in the day as it was. It's just a stream of consciousness that was flowing through her, and it just seemed like timelessness. So we started that morning.
So does that, and I read the book, so I'm sure I've read that book a couple of times, so I'm sure that I've read your story. I don't remember exactly which one it is. Now I'm going to have to go look and see. But so does that then seem to indicate to you that when we are not in our human form, that we experience time differently?
Definitely.
Okay. All right. And then I have one more question from chat. Elaine. Actually, Elaine has two questions. So she says, I'm sorry, my dogs are barking at my husband coming home. Do you think it's possible for siblings and friends in one life to keep finding each other in the next? And how how do you think that this happens? And does it happen often?
Oh, it happens a lot because we travel in these groups. So what tends to happen is when the client is experiencing the past life, because, they're doing that before they get to the LBL, they will have a familiarity or a recognition of some of the other people that come up in the past, and they'll know them by their current life name. They'll recognize that that's their brother in current life, or that's, a sibling in current life. And so when you go into the life between lives, that's after we go through the death scene in the past life to the between. There's time that's spent in a place where they explore soul groups. And so soul groups would talk about, would help the client understand their connection to other people that are in their life now, or those people that tend to incarnate with them most of their lifetimes or many lifetimes.
Right.
They may sit one out. They might stay out, or they might just be in the lifetime for a moment. But it might be a pivotal moment that person comes through and changes that client's life direction. But, you could be mother and daughter this time and be siblings next time, or have been father, son, or boss, mentor, teacher. You play different roles to one another. It's not always a family member, but we tend to show up, and it's amazing how that happens.
So does that mean then, because I think that there are a lot of people who believe that you have one soulmate. I hear that expressed a lot. This person is my soulmate. This is the person that travels with me through lifetimes. Is that a real thing? I mean, is that maybe a simplification of what you're talking about with the soul groups?
From information from the guides and the council and the information that I've gotten, there's that one person, that one soul that's sparked at the same time that your soul is sparked, and you travel through all these experiences and all these lifetimes together. Now there may be that time where one soul stays out and the other soul is incarnated, and they learn by being separated. And then there may be that time where they're adversaries, or they do something not so great to one another, but you learn through it. But there are soulmates that are sparked at the same time. And as I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of a client session that I had where one of the guides was explaining how difficult it is to be on Earth, because this is the only planet where we experience loss and death the way that we do. When our soulmate dies, they die. Now, we're going to see them when we leave this life and go back to heaven, to the between, but we experience the pain of that loss. And, they were sharing that on other planets, a loss is not final the way it feels while we're here. But that's the reason we come to Earth, to experience some of those earthly emotions and relationships, and then other things too. We come here to experience chocolate and, fun things that you can't experience in the spirit world the same way you can in a body. Okay. So they have a lot of humor up there. And, when you get too serious, they lighten it up for you.
Well, I'm pretty sure that I came to experience chocolate. And pickles. Pickles are my favorite food in the world, and I'm pretty sure that's what I came for this time.
I said, I'll go one more time, but you got to promise me there's going to be some chocolate there.
That's right. And puppies.
I'll do it, but only if there's chocolate and puppies, and maybe some kittens.
I'm going to remember that for the next time because people come back and back and back, is my understanding. I actually have had, what did I say, Rick, 5?
Yeah, yes, you did.
Now, just for doing different things, and I have a timeline from probably about the 1600s on of what my past lives have been. But people, how many times do people come back?
I haven't gotten a definite number. They like to say, they like to be vague when I ask that question, because I ask that all the time, and they'll say as many as it takes. If we're getting too serious with some of the technical questions and they're trying to get a point across to a client, they'll come across with an answer like that. As many as it takes, an infinite number, and then they've been given specific numbers of lifetimes. But I don't want to say, because sometimes people hear that number and think that's written in stone, that everybody has that same number of lifetimes.
Right, but it's more than 2 is what I'm asking you. I mean, it's...
Oh, yes, many
hundreds.
Times.
Yeah, okay.
Hundreds.
Okay.
And you come back to work on various issues, and, you might have a series of lifetimes on a certain issue, and you might play each side of it in the different roles that you might take. And then when it's time, you'll move on to another theme that you may be working on, like compassion.
Okay.
Okay. We have a question for you from chat, Bryn. First off, I'm sorry about that. My computer froze up, so I had to turn it off and reboot, and have these problems every once in a while. But we do have a question from chat, and it's actually it's a question that I have as well. The question is, have you ever had any clients who have researched and found their other lives? If so, did they handle researching the past lives well?
What was the last part of that question?
The second part is, if so, did they handle researching the past lives well?
I'm sorry, the phone's breaking out. Are you saying do they handle the research well?
Yes.
Okay. I have had clients be able to research some of the information, and most seem really surprised that they were able to verify dates and times.
Okay.
One of my most recent ones was a guy that he was a kid that liked to skip school and go sell newspapers on the street corner, and he wasn't supposed to do that because he was supposed to be in school, and this was a Chicago street corner, and I can't remember the date exactly, but it was like early 1930s, something like that.
Okay.
And his father was a tailor, and so he was just so proud of how many newspapers he could sell and how well he could do. And he loved his street corner, and he helped out his family, and he would secretly buy himself things so his parents didn't have to come up with the money because they were barely getting by. And I had him look around and give me the name of the streets, the intersections, some of the buildings. We got his name. We got a lot of information. And then this client went on to research that after the session and found all kinds of information that verified everything that he had come up with in the session. And it was also a place he had never been before. He had not been to Chicago, so he was really surprised that those street corners actually existed.
Wow.
That's pretty cool. Rick's from Chicago.
It's so much fun. It's just so much fun to have your clients experience this. They might go back to a time in history where they're observing something, and they may or may not be the king or the queen, but they could have been in the king's court, or they could have been around the castle. So they know things because they were there, but it's not always that they were the famous person. Sometimes they know more by being a little bit more in the shadows. They've been able to verify things that they've learned, from that time period in history. It could be a time period they've always been drawn to. It could be a time period they've never really been drawn to, but when they started experiencing it in the session, things came through them that they couldn't have known any other way. And then research has shown information about the period of, clothing of the time, foods of the time, so the things that client never thought to look up.
So let me ask you this, Bryn. Why is it that we don't remember our past lives? I know some people do. I've been told that I have several past lives and that I have 2 more that I'm supposed to live. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But I don't remember any of this, and I know other people don't, except for a few glimpses of insight. Why don't we remember being, in the king's castle?
Some people remember more easily than others.
Mm-hmm.
What I believe it is, from my experience, I've done hundreds of these sessions. So I'll ask the guides if I have questions. I'll ask them and see, how often I get a similar answer. And I believe that it's a couple of things. you program into the life that you're going to live, into this body, into this mind, you put the elements in it that you're going to need for that lifetime. The other thing is, so maybe you didn't need to know that information this time around. Okay. The other thing is that if you tried to remember all of your lifetimes all at one time, I think it would, it would be overwhelming to your brain.
Yeah, your brain would explode, I'm sure. Sure.
Exactly. Like, you couldn't function in this life if you're remembering all of that all at the same time.
Okay.
And right. that's the kind of information I've gotten through the guide. So,
I have had times in my life, and people who have come into my lives, well, in this life, let's talk about this one. I've had people come into my life where I instantly felt some kind of connection to them, and I think everybody's had this experience, where you meet that person and you know that this is a person that you're not supposed to know, or that you are supposed to know. So how do we recognize? I'm assuming that those are people that have agreed to come to play some significant role in my life. So how do we recognize those, and how do we know that we're not just making it up because we think he's cute or something?
Well, there's that soul recognition where you recognize those key players or those significant players that are coming through, and there's no accident that they've come along. And then there are those times that have you ever dreamed about someone or something?
I actually dreamed about my husband right before I met him. And, yeah. So, yeah.
Well, we're given those signs. We're given signs along the way, and it just lights up something in us that has that recognition when that person comes along.
But
we just know.
Can we miss people? I mean, do you know what I mean? What if we just totally ignore or miss the sign?
Then it has to come through another way. I think we can miss opportunities. I think we can close ourselves off. We can shut down and not accept the opportunity.
Okay.
And if that happens, events have to come about to create another opportunity, a different way.
Okay. So they show back up.
Well, sometimes.
Okay.
You know how events lead towards something, and then if that person chooses to use their free will and shut it down, then maybe or maybe not, but depending on what's happening, it may be possible to set up another series of events. And then there are those times where it was meant to be a near miss because that wasn't the time for both parties to be totally ready.
Okay.
So when they come back together again, it's the actual, both parties will recognize each other and be there. And I'm not just talking about relationships. I'm also talking about just friendships. You know, that friend that comes along at just the right moment and you feel like you've known them forever.
Right.
Well, but how about the jerk that comes along that is absolutely horrible to you, but you get this really valuable lesson for having known them, even though you can't stand them?
Yes. Well, sometimes you can learn from the negative experience, and you can learn never to do that again. And
boy, howdy.
The guides have a lot of compassion, but they have a lot of humor too. And so they will tease with the clients when they're asking about some of those relationships in their past lives or the past in their current life. And when it gets explained, they will let them know that now that you've finished that lesson, thankfully you don't have to experience that one again. You cleared up some stuff just by having that experience.
So does that mean then that when I actually, and I have a hunch that I often don't get it, but so does that mean when I actually do get it, when I have that aha moment about something, that I'm not going to ever have to deal with that again?
Not necessarily, because you can forget that you learned the lesson.
Oh, okay.
But usually you get it, and then you move on.
Okay.
You know, when it's that strong of a red flag or a message, you learn the lesson and then you're done, and then you get to experience something else.
Okay.
All right.
Is it possible, it's another question that I've always had, is it possible for your soul to split? What I mean is that you live two past lives at once, but in different parts of the world.
Well, it's possible. We've had that happen in the sessions and gotten some more insights into that, but it takes a lot of energy to do that.
Okay.
So Dr. Newton likes to talk about souls. He refers to them as experienced. Not necessary levels of advancement as much as they're just have more practice coming here to Earth. Because we're all learning while we're here. But sometimes when you've been here more times, you're not learning the survival stuff. You're working on the relationships and the other stuff that you can work on when you're not just trying to put food on the table. And so when you're a little more experienced and you can play around with the energy and incarnate in two different bodies, at the same time, usually through my experience, I haven't had any experiences where they've actually run into each other in that life. They usually are in other parts of the world. But it's a learning experience. And now that we're talking about this, I did have one client that her energy seemed to get stronger at one point in her current life. And the guides were explaining that the dual soul that the other lifetime had completed, and that soul had gone back home. So it helped free up something. But we couldn't get more information to get all the details. I mean, that it was exciting.
So
that's rare. That's rare.
Yeah.
Sure.
One of the things that when I did my Life Between Lives hypnotherapy, and it's not something that I've talked about to a lot of people because to me it was a pretty intensely private experience because there was a lot of learning that went on there. And so I've never been driven to write about it. And I write about everything. I'm a writer. So, everything is fodder. And I've been pretty private about it. But one of the things I learned, and it actually really shocked me, is he asked me, how much of your energy did you bring with you? Or how much, is it your energy? But what percentage of yourself did you bring with you, essentially? And my response was something like 15 or 25%, which seems ridiculously low. Is that common? And why did I do that?
Why did you do that? Do you remember?
Well, I will tell you that I have a huge amount of health problems, and I have low physical energy. I have struggled with anemia for 15 years. It's severe anemia for 15 years, so I'm always exhausted. And I think it's so that I'm quieter and paying more attention to the other things. I don't think I'm supposed to be a super physical person in this lifetime. That's my guess, is that I'm supposed to be more focused on kind of the spiritual and the cerebral stuff. But why? Is that common that people bring that?
Well, in my experience, that's a low number. Now, I have had a few clients that have had numbers around that 15, 20%, 25%.
Yeah.
But I would say more people, from what I can remember, more people are around 40%.
So you don't bring 75. All your energy.
No, you leave some
where's
behind.
The rest what's the rest of you doing?
Well, there's always a part of us that's left back there. And the thing is, there are different reasons why we bring in more energy than other times. So if I found out that you brought in 15%, the next question would be, and what are you learning by bringing in just 15% of your energy? What's the reason for that? And then maybe somebody that's bringing in a higher percentage of energy would say that they were going to need it for this lifetime. They just knew they were going to need it. And it was a life packed with a lot of experiences that they were going to need more energy. Just the same way as you would choose your body. Sometimes clients choose a really strong, sturdy body because they've got a lot to accomplish.
Sure.
And at other times they choose a different type body because it's gonna teach them, by not having like the perfect body, by having an overweight body or some kind of ailment, you learn through that ailment, and others around you have to, if you're one of those souls that you're a warrior and you always take care of everybody else, the soldier, the warrior, they may experience a lifetime where they come back and are forced to let everybody take care of them.
Got it.
Okay. Which is very difficult if you're used to that. Yeah,
I would imagine. So we're at the top of the hour. We're up against a break. Can you stick around for another 45 minutes or so?
Sure.
Cool. So here's what we'll do. We'll go to break, and when we come back, we have some listener questions that I'm sorry, Rick, I've been hogging the conversation.
No, it's quite all right. I've been experiencing a lot of weird stuff on my end with my computer. I think, I hope my computer's not getting ready to crash on me.
I hope it's not too. Okay, well, so stick around, guys. We are talking about past lives, life between lives with Bryn Blankinship. It's Paranormal Underground Radio on the Hazy Radio Network. We will be right back.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Paranormal Underground Radio on hazyradio.com. We are your hosts, Karen and Rick. For the first 45 minutes, we have been talking to Bryn Blankinship, a hypnotherapist and author, as well as a expert in past life regression and life between lives, spiritual regression. Bryn, thank you so much for hanging out with us for another segment.
Oh, cool. Thanks for having me.
Hey, anytime. It's one of my favorite subjects.
So we had a couple questions from chat that we haven't got to yet. So, Karen, did you want to field those?
No, you go ahead. I've been hogging the conversation. I'm going to sit quietly now. I'm not really, but I'm going to pretend I'm going to sit quietly.
One of the questions from chat is kind of one that I'm very much interested in, because I am a huge believer as well as researcher into psychic ability. The question is, do you think that psychics can really read past lives?
Oh, I think there's some really gifted psychics that are able to do that.
Okay.
So I'll take that a step further and say that I often compare when the client is experiencing the LBL or the past life, it's like a psychic reading, but the client is reading themselves.
Okay.
So they're in deep trance. And you're asking them questions and things are coming through them. The response to the question as if someone is speaking in their ear, or, images, scenes come to them in the session. They just know things. And it's different than if a psychic is reading another person, because it's coming through this client in their own voice. And then when the soul self comes through, it's still speaking through that client that's laying in the chair, but their voice shifts, it changes. It's usually very beautiful when the soul voice comes through, but it's using that client's body to speak.
Okay.
Sometimes there's a lot of people speaking in that chair. A couple of different voices coming out.
So, real quick, can I follow up, Rick? I told you I was going to be quiet, and I totally lied. So, when someone is in the midst of this life between life session, and I know that the way that you traditionally take them into it is you take them into a past life, you take them through the death of that past life, and then they're in this life between lives, like their most recent past life and this one. So, is what they're experiencing, is that a memory, or is it something that's happening in the here and now?
Well, it's happening in the now.
Okay.
It's happening in real time when it's happening. But they can certainly bring up things that would be a memory from another time too. But in that moment, it's happening as real.
Okay, so when, for instance, I went in and stood before my council of elders, I was actually, that wasn't me remembering something, that was something that was happening now.
That was a now kind of thing. And sometimes clients will stand outside the door and the guide will say they're getting ready, as if, it's as if one meeting is ending and they're waiting for the client to go in. it's happening in now time, and it's a very, very profound experience. You know, there's a lot of humor, but it's so deep, and it's so meaningful for the client to go before their counsel, because they know that these are the beings that helped to get them here on the planet this time. You know, they help orchestrate and organize and plan out the experiences we're going to have.
So I want to follow up on the council real quickly. So if I think of going before a council of elders, or when I would think of it before I had my life between lives anyway, it seemed kind of like it might be a little judgy.
Yes. And the client may have that expectation that they're going to be judged, but the council is very compassionate. They're very compassionate, and they will sometimes tease with the client to get them to lighten up, to tell them not to be so serious. They may appear a certain way. They may have on robes, and they're sitting in a, in a semicircle in front of the client, and when the client starts to lighten up, they may peel off those robes. Their colors may shift. You know, the client does have the feeling that they're going before to the principal's office to be reprimanded for how they're living their life. But usually they leave there with a different experience. You know, feeling supported. They might be given some guidance as to, some suggestions for areas of improvement, but it's always done in a loving way.
So then it's not like, the Judeo-Christian idea of judgment.
No, not at all.
I found it very reassuring, actually. One of the first things they said to me when I went in is, "You're doing better than you think." So that was nice to hear.
I hope I hear that one day.
Oh, it was really nice to hear, let me tell you. I was like, oh, okay.
So now, Bryn, I have a question. I have a question. It's about fear. And I asked Dr. Moody this when he was on. I have a very strange, irrational fear of water. I can bathe in it, I can drink it, but to get me in a swimming pool is damn near impossible, or even in a lake. Is it possible that I could have drowned in a former life? And do we carry that fear from one life to the next?
Is there anything that happened to you in current life that involved water?
Never. I've never had, never almost drowned. I've never had, an uncle or whatever get rough with me in the water and dunk me one too many times. I've never had anything like that.
Okay. Then it's possible it's come from a past life, and it could be drowning. It could be several past lives where you've drowned. Now, I always approach, I always try to find out if there's something significant in current life, because it could have started in current life, or current life could have triggered a pattern of something that had happened in other lifetimes as well.
Right. No, nothing. Nothing has ever happened in this life where, water left a negative, impact on me.
See, I'm pretty sure my Weird Al Yankovic fear comes from this life. I don't think it's past life related.
It'll probably carry over to the next one, too.
Probably.
Wouldn't it be cool to put him under and find out about some of his past lives? Or go into the future and regress him back to this life? That would be a trip.
I'm just wondering, it's like he's a nerd god. What did he ever do to you, Karen?
I don't know. I'm afraid of him. That's all I can say. So we have some more questions from chat.
Okay, you go ahead.
I don't know who this is from. It might even be from Cheryl. If someone gets ill, then eventually passes away from that, it is from Cheryl, from that illness, what is the lesson that they were to learn during their lifetime?
Well, there's not one lesson. It could be different for each person. So we would need to put that individual under and find out what it was for them. But to give you a couple of examples, it could be that they needed to learn how to manage their energy better so that they didn't allow their body to get so run down. And this is what happened when it went too far. It could be that there's an agreement between some of those souls in their life that they're going to experience this person leaving.
Right.
It could be that maybe this person is usually they usually outlive the others in their family situation or their loved ones in a lot of past lives. So this time he said, "Hey, why don't you go first? We'll see what it's like if you go, because you're always the one that's there last." It could be so many different reasons. So it's individual to that person and why their dynamic was set up to have that ailment, that illness.
When you think about, you say that we set up these arrangements with people and we set up kind of these flags, I guess, or significant events that we're supposed to experience. When you look at the intricacy of that, it's mind-boggling. It's like trying to picture infinity. I mean, there must be some really good logistics soul on the other side, because
they're like air traffic control up there. Air traffic control, managing all the souls coming and going. I mean, sometimes when a client is in session and they're describing it, I get little glimpses of how expansive that is and how far that goes out, how many random events, but they're not random, had to happen to bring these souls together at this time in history.
Yeah. Right.
It's crazy. And especially when you have people, if they're reincarnating in groups and they're on different planets and they're, it's mind-boggling to me. So I have something that I want to ask you about, and this is personal to me. And the people who listen to this show know about it because we've been talking about it recently. So I have, outside of my past life regression hypnotherapies, I have encountered a woman who I had an incredible fascination with her. Sorry about my dogs again. Anyway, I've had an incredible fascination with her for my... since I first heard of her, I had an incredible fascination with the event in which she died when I first heard about it. Somebody recently found a picture of her, and she looks like me. I mean, so I have all of these questions now because I have so much in common with this woman, and I was drawn to her and a few other things. But at the same time, everybody's going, well, you should go get a past life regression hypnotherapy for it. But I'm afraid that if I do that, because of what I know about her and what my expectation is, what I'm going to see is going to be driven by my expectation as opposed to reality. So is that a legitimate concern?
It could be a concern, but, when you would want to make sure you have someone that's experienced that can put you into a deep state, so that you can't consciously create these memories. And what will happen is there's the expectation that you have going in. Yeah. You're going to find that it's very different once you go under.
Okay.
You're going to find out details about that life that, well, it may not even go to that life if you want her. But you could find out more about why you're drawn to that person.
Right.
Okay.
But there would be details that you don't know now. That would make it all make sense.
Okay.
And the way to direct that would be to take you back to a time in history that would help you, a time in your soul's history that would help you to understand why you have a fascination with that person.
Sure.
Because it could also be that she was in your life, you weren't her, but that you were drawn to, stuff about her.
Sure.
If you were her, what do they call it, her lady in waiting, you would have been around her, waiting on her all the time. So it could have been something like that.
Sure. Well, this isn't a famous person. This is just a person who died in a fairly well-known incident is all. So, but it's not anybody who's famous or, she didn't have ladies in waiting. I know that much about her.
No. So, well, you could have lived in her house or you could have been her neighbor and known a lot about her.
Right. I know. I could have been her sister or who knows. Because that's the other thing is that, so just because we do have groups of people we reincarnate with, it's not like the hundreds of people we know in our life or have met throughout our life that every one of them is somebody that is part of our soul group, right? Soul groups tend to be fairly small.
They're fairly small, 10 to 12 people, something like that, but they're companion groups. So there's their immediate soul group, and then there are other groups that say, hey, I'll come back and help you with that. We'll do this and we'll do that, and we'll come back. So it could be other groups that are working on the same thing, and they'll come together with your group to work out the experiences.
Okay.
I always describe it, because clients ask these kind of questions before they come in for the session. These are all great questions. And I always describe it like a Shakespearean acting troupe. They travel around and they play different roles, and this time one's going to play this person, one's going to play the other, and then they're going to go to another town and they're going to change roles and take on the opposite because they got tired of playing that character, so why don't we come back in and play this character?
Right.
So you're traveling with those same groups, and then you've got other people that come forward, like supporting actors in the cast.
Okay. Well, because the other thing that I did see is that I had been I was part of like a large soul group, but that there were 3 of us that like broke off and were doing something else, and they were like my main. Is that something that happened? Clearly, it's what I saw, but is that something that's fairly common as well, that maybe a soul group breaks into smaller groups?
Yeah, you can do that if they're working on something. And occasionally someone will feel like they're alone. They can't find anyone in their group. Mm-hmm. And, it's been explained that the group moved on and that hopefully they'll catch up with them later.
Oh, my God, I'm in the remedial group.
No. That's not
right.
necessarily what that means.
It's remedial math all over again. I'm sorry, go on.
You could be ahead of everybody else. It could be that they're ahead of the
No, I'm pretty sure it's remedial.
So another question from Chad also comes from Elaine. It's an interesting question as well. Do people stay within the same geological area, or can they move around from, say, Africa to Asia?
Oh, they can move around. They move around. And I like to ask, what kind of cultures do you like to experience? Mm-hmm. And, I had one woman just name off all types of Japanese, Asian, African, exotic lifetimes. And they said they planted her in the United States. I'm not going to say the town. I almost accidentally did. But they planted her there because she had some learning to do that she couldn't do in those other cultures, because they were, as a female in current life, she can experience more here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. You can move around, but there are also maybe certain cultures that you're drawn to. So, I've had lots of Japanese lifetimes.
Really?
I would love to go there, and I'm just drawn to that culture. But I've had some really good experiences there.
Right.
So why not go back and experience it?
Right.
But this time I needed to be in the U.S. because they're just a little more not too conservative as they would have been over there, being a female.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely the way I am too. I feel very drawn to Asian culture. I think Asian culture is very efficient. It's very old, but I also feel very drawn to ancient Mesopotamia and Acadia and Samaria. These places really fire my imagination, and I love reading about them endlessly. So. Sure. I've been told that I've had 15 to 16 past lives, and I've been told that I've had 2 more. So it always kind of makes me wonder, and that is a good question, because it always made me wonder as well, did I live in this time, in those time periods and in those places? So thank you for answering that.
Well, there's also, certain places that you may be repelled by and never want to go to.
My parents' house.
That's for this lifetime, Rick.
That could have something to do with a past life, too.
Okay.
If you had some really bad experiences there, you may not want to go back. Not your parents' house, but other countries.
Sure.
Okay.
So, how long, I mean, are we coming back every year or so? Or how long do we go? How long do we get to rest before we have to come back again? And do we get to choose when we stop?
Well, some people
I'd like to be done.
they would. I hear that a lot, and so they're surprised when they talk to their counsel, and they're told that they're reminded that they chose this life because they suggest, but we really do have free will as to whether we're coming back or not, and they can suggest, but it's up to us whether we actually come. So sometimes people come in a little dreading it. They come in dreading the experience of what it's going to be, where others are in a more willing state of readiness to just come on in and experience life. It's really different as far as how long we take in between. I mean, some might sit out for decades, and then others need to turn back around. I've worked with people that died in Vietnam in their past life and have come back and are already, old enough, late 20s to be able to experience a past life or an LBL session. You need to be you need to have a little bit of life experience before we can put you in and help you experience this.
Right. So what about people who have committed suicide, for instance, in their last life? Do they have to take a little extra time? Do they get sent right back?
They often need a little extra time to process the experience of the life. And, each one's going to take a little bit, it's going to be different again, depending on the individual soul. But under the right circumstances, it'll be time for them to come back and come back in.
Okay. Elaine wants to know, if we don't come back, where do we go?
That's a good question. We stay up there in the between.
Right.
But there are things to do up there in the between. So we go places that, I don't know.
Okay. So Rick and I are both, actually I'll ask Chad's question first. Chad wants to know, what about the Ascended Masters?
Well, they're in another part that we don't really get to go to yet.
Okay. Because we're not ascended enough yet.
Right. There's like a solemnness when the client gets to that part. And, as the facilitator, I'm with them on some level. I'm with them as they're going through this. And there's always that area over there that becomes very solemn, and that's where the Ascended Masters are. But we don't really get to know what's over there.
Okay.
Or at least I haven't had clients experience that.
So Rick and I both research ghosts. We do paranormal investigation. And a lot of people who listen to our show are really into ghosts. And so what have you come across in your work with regard to souls that stick around in this plane after they die?
Well, sometimes souls are not ready. They die, but they're not ready to cross all the way over because they want to stay with their loved ones. So they could be an earthbound. They might stay behind to kind of look over someone that's still alive, one of their children or their spouse.
Sure.
They just might stick around for a while, a long period of time, and be tied to a property or something that holds them here.
Have you encountered people? Have you encountered people like that?
I don't have that many, but I've had some. I've had a few, and it was usually grief at not being ready to leave because their loved ones were here and they wanted to be with them.
So is it that they haven't quite totally remembered who they are yet? Is that part of it?
No, it's they had unfinished business when it was time to cross into the spirit world.
Sure.
And so they didn't make their exit point all the way.
Okay.
So usually doing the session will help them clear up that energy.
All right.
That's left behind and then cross over.
So does everybody eventually move on? Is there any spirit who is earthbound that's truly stuck here?
can't answer that from this perspective.
Sure.
But eventually they all cross over.
Okay.
The clients that I've worked with who have been stuck, we've been able to help them cross because their soul lingered. But see, it's different than you're thinking of spirits that you can see externally, that you can visibly see. And I can't answer that from this perspective.
Sure.
Okay.
I can only go with the clients that have touched on that in their session.
So what about, have you ever encountered anybody who, you think about people who've done really horrible things, and of course Hitler comes to mind. That's the first person. Or, somebody like Ted Bundy or something like that. Was that really their life's path, or did they go awry somewhere? Did they really choose that?
Well, they have free will when they get here.
Sure.
And without being able to take that client and put them under and talk with them to find out more, I'll do my best to answer that. I believe they went awry to a degree. Like, they were going to come in and they were supposed to do certain things, but they took it to an extreme.
Okay.
They took it beyond what was meant to be.
But now this actually leads into the question that I have concerning this. A lot of people would say that what we're talking about here is a very Western idea concerning reincarnation. I know that in the East, if you say lived a horrible life like Adolf Hitler, they're more inclined to believe that you're going to come back as a snail or a leech. What about the more traditional approach of reincarnation?
Well, the more traditional, what I've experienced with clients is that they go through some type of restoration process, some type of healing, and then there are times where they don't come back and incarnate, but there are other times where they're able to come back and experience life, and they would have a life that would be the opposite. So if they killed in a life, they might experience a life where they don't kill. It's all about saving lives or something the opposite of what the life was that was so out of balance in the past incarnation. But I haven't experienced. I've had people that were killers, in their past life. For some reason, I was getting a lot of gangsters and mobsters.
Really?
Interesting.
Yes. And I haven't figured out why that is. But I haven't had any, mass murderers. I've had some people that have done some really bad things, but it was really difficult for that client to admit out loud that they had done those things in their past life.
Oh, I bet.
But then the guys went on to explain why that happened or what was going on and what they're experiencing now as a result of that experience. But I haven't had any Hitlers or,
Yeah. So I would imagine that you doing what you do, the people, just as we cross paths with our children and our friends and our spouses and all of that, the people that come to you for their session come to you specifically for a reason. So is there something in there for you then as well?
Yes. I have people come from all over, all parts, other countries, all parts of the U.S. And, I really do try to find them someone in their own backyard because I know a lot of the practitioners that do this work. And they'll insist on coming to me. And somehow during the session, it starts to all make sense as to why it was me. And it's not that I was in a past life. It's not that kind of a thing. There have been once or twice that this happened, but it's really that there was just a connection, and it was set up to be that way. It's so profound that I almost don't want to say on the radio.
Okay.
But, there's just,
no, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a reason it needed to be me. if it was me in that time. And there was a reason it needed to be during this time period and not some previous time period. There are times where we try to set it up and it just doesn't work out. It might take another year or so before they come in.
Right.
All stuff and everything makes sense.
Right. So when I say, that I'd considered doing it for years and I waited until last year to do it, that was because that was the right time.
Yes. Yes. And, you're allowing yourself to go under. The facilitator is guiding you, is giving you suggestions to relax and to go deeper, but you're allowing yourself to let go and go into that space.
Right.
So if you aren't in a state of readiness, we can't make you go there.
Right. Let's actually talk about hypnosis in general for a few minutes, because I find that people have a lot of questions and misconceptions about it, because what we experience of hypnosis is usually the guy up on stage who thunks you on the head and then makes you squawk like a chicken in front of hundreds of people.
Yeah.
So can you explain how hypnosis works?
Yes. So, the facilitator, so all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. Whether you're working with a facilitator, a tape, you're taking yourself into hypnosis, it's all self-directed in that you're allowing yourself to go to that deeper state. The hypnotherapist is just giving you suggestions, is helping you to go deeper by the suggestions they're giving. And we use progressive relaxation for this kind of a session. And we can't make you go there. And it's not something that we do to you. It's something that we do with you, because we're kind of holding your hand as you go through it. But if you are not able to let go and follow the instructions, if you're trying to make it happen, if you've read the books and you think, it's going to happen a certain way because I read it in the book, I read stories about that, so this is how it has to happen, you're going to block your own session. You're going to stand in your own way of being able to be in the moment and just go with the flow. So when you're going with the flow, you're able to go deeper. And, with hypnosis, you're going to a certain level, just general hypnosis. And then with the past life regression and the LBL, you're going into a deeper trance state. It's deeper, the voice slows down, the body, the pulse rate drops, the body relaxes. I mean, they're in a profound state, yet they're able to speak to the facilitator, to the hypnotherapist, the past life regressionist. And that's when the regressionist is asking questions and the client is responding, but it's in that deeper state. And then they have access to the deeper part, but they can talk. That's what is really surprising, that you'd be able to talk in that deeper state and answer back what you're getting.
Mm-hmm. So what surprised me is that I felt perfectly aware.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like I was having a dream. It wasn't even like I was daydreaming. I mean, I felt perfectly aware. And the very first time I did it, I struggled with it a lot. But I think it worked anyway, because one side of my brain would be like, don't get this answer, but the answers would come up from the other side anyway, and that was when I did just a past life regression, and it was all verifiable. But I mean, I was that person who fought it, and I was sure that I couldn't be hypnotized. Are there people who just can't be or won't be?
There are people that won't be, and there's some people that can't be. But really, if you are if you have the ability to follow instructions, to focus, you have to be able to focus in this state. So if somebody has some type of condition that they're not able to follow instructions, or they're not grounded, clear-minded and grounded, it's not for them. This is not something for somebody that has, it's not grounded in current life reality, because we're about to take them into another reality, and we want to bring them back so that they can come back and function and be all here when they leave the office and go out and try to go back into their life. But they'll be in an expanded state of awareness from having had that experience.
Right. So, what does it feel like when you're hypnotized? Because I know on break you said, for instance, that sometimes in the middle of a session a client has to go to the bathroom. Well, I'm pretty sure that would just pull me right out of it.
Well, it starts to, because you can tell that they're starting to come up a little bit, and you use deepeners and things throughout to help keep them down in that state. But one of two things can happen. They're having an emotional release in the past life, and they're needing to release their kidneys in current life, or they drank too much water or coffee that morning, and it's getting later in the day. They need to take that break. So there are things that we do to help bring them up just enough. We don't bring them out of trance, but we bring them up just enough that they can function. And thankfully, the restroom is right across the hall from my office, so I help them get over there. They function on their own, and then they come back and pick up where they left off. I mean, they sit right back down in the chair, the recliner, and I give them a couple of suggestions, give them a chance to acclimate back down, and then they pick up right where the story was unfolding. It's the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And that's a question that everybody always has, because they know they're going to be in session for a long time.
Right. But so they're aware if they have, are you aware of other physical sensations? Are you experiencing, if I'm in a chair and I'm hypnotized and say I'm in a past life, when I experience a physical sensation, am I experiencing that as Karen or as the person whose life I am viewing?
Usually it says the person in whose life you are experiencing. So they're laughing and they're crying. And
I cried.
Tend to report it. They report it more visually. That's another thing. Everybody tends to think that under hypnosis you're visual. Not everybody is visual. A lot of people.
Mine was kinesthetic. Yeah, mine is kinesthetic. Yeah. So what do you do for some? So when somebody's kinesthetic, how is that different? When you're visual, you're seeing things.
Yeah. So some people are seeing it, and some people are feeling it, and they just know the answer, and they feel it come through them.
Yeah, that's what I do.
It feels like I'm walking through a forest, or it feels like I'm riding a horse, where others will see that they're riding the horse.
Right.
Okay.
But they're experiencing it, all the emotions tied to it.
Yeah.
The emotions of that person and what they're experiencing.
I was actually shocked when I was doing it at how chatty I was. He'd ask a question, and I mean, it would just roll off my tongue, and I'd think, am I making this up? Because it was blah, 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 blah. It was really strange.
Right.
So that's how it works, huh?
That's exactly how it works. And you hear yourself saying it, and it's like, can this be real? But it's coming through you. It's coming from a deeper part of you.
I know. The one that what convinced me in the very first one that I did, that I wrote about the first past life, is that I hate crying. I cry usually in one situation, and that's one of the things I have with my psychic abilities is I'm empathic, and so usually it's not me that makes me cry; it's someone or something else. But I also cry like at really sad TV commercials because I'm kind of a sap. But I'm not really a big crier, yet I'm sitting in this chair, and much to my horror, I start crying as I'm describing the death of, I think it was my husband or something, and these tears are rolling down my cheeks, and as I'm doing it, the ones, because I said it's like my brain had split into two, the one side of my brain was going, holy crap, I can't believe I'm crying, this is so horrifying, and the other side of my brain is going, so.
That happens. Sometimes it's really funny, because you don't want to laugh when the client's experiencing this.
Yeah.
You can see that they're crying. I mean, I can look at the chair. I can see them. They're crying.
Yeah.
And then we'll go, what are these wet things rolling down my face? Like they're not recognizing their tears because they're in that other state. And anyway, it's really interesting.
So you've seen the struggle like mine, where it's like, oh my God, I'm horrified, I'm crying, but they're still crying.
Yes.
That is honestly, that is like the weirdest thing to have that feeling.
They're crying and they're not horrified. Those tears are just pouring out, and they're just going on and on with the story. Like, you want to hand them a tissue and they don't even care.
Yeah.
Their tears flowing.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Well,
It's very moving. And so, are we done? Are we on?
No, go ahead. No, you're fine.
I was going to say, it's very moving. And so those tears represent huge shifts, that are taking place within them. The stuff that they're crying out, the lifetime of emotion, the grieving, through the different lives. It's very powerful for the client to release what they've been holding on to.
I'm pretty sure I broke out the ugly cry at one point. So, that lucky hypnotherapist. So
that means you had a really good session.
Yeah, I guess so. And it actually, the first time I did it, that was one of the things that was, I mean, before I'd done the research and everything else, that was one of the things that convinced me that was real, was that I was just sobbing over this. What my rational mind was telling me was a hypothetical husband who died, but clearly it was more than that. So we have come to the part of our show that we call Shameless Self-Promotion Corner. This is where you get to promote anything, tell people where they can find you, tell them to buy your book, whatever you would like, Bryn.
Oh, well, thank you.
Sure.
Well, you can find me at www.brynblankinship.com. BrynBlankinship.com. And then I have a couple of my stories that have been published in Memories of the Afterlife. That's a book by Michael Newton. I have a story in there, Chapter 3, When Children Teach from the Grave. And then in Brian Weiss's latest book, Miracles Happen, I have a story written up in there. Not sure what page. I think it's 110. But check it out and read the books and find out more about these kinds of sessions.
Well, thank you. I hope that you will come back and talk to us again because, this is such a big subject.
Oh, I would love to.
Yeah, we've barely scratched the surface. Cheryl can make that happen. That's what she's good at. So thank you, Bryn, so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And Rick, I'm sorry I hogged the conversation.
No, that's quite all right. I mean, you know a lot more about this, and it was a pleasure just to sit here and learn.
Great. So I hope you'll come back on again sometime, Bryn.
Oh, definitely. And thank you so much for having me. This has been great. And the time, too.
And
in the session.
Well, and we overcame our initial technical difficulties, so it was all good.
Yes.
All right. Have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.